everyone. Welcome to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm Sydney Yeager, the Public Programs Coordinator at the museum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's inaugural New York Jewish Book Festival. This event is on What Makes a Jewish Book with Arthur A. Levine, Diane Hess, Karen Smith, and Aviva Rosenberg. We hope you will explore the 32 events that are happening throughout the museum today, meet some of the 85 speakers, and get books signed at one of the 72 author signings in our main lobby and events hall on the second floor. While you are here, we also encourage you to take the time to visit our exhibitions, The Holocaust, What Hate Can Do, on the main level, and Survivors' Faces of Life After the Holocaust, Photographs by Martin Scholler, on the third floor. Andy Goldsworthy's Garden of Stones is also worth a visit, just outside of our wonderful Cafe Locks. So the whole museum is open to you today. You can also pick up holiday gifts and books at the Pickman Museum shop and visitor services on the main level. We are encouraging people to wear masks in the museum, and we hope you will share feedback with us in our post-festival survey, which will be in your inboxes tomorrow. This program is made possible in part by support from the Battery Park City Authority. Your donations also help us to present these programs. This event is co-presented by the Association of Jewish Libraries. And now I'm glad to introduce our speakers. Arthur A. Levine is the president and editor-in-chief of Levine Querido, a vibrant new independent publisher distributed by Chronicle Books. Levine Querido is born of a fervent mission to give voice to a uniquely talented, exceptionally diverse group of authors and artists, a career-long passion of its founder. Dianne Hess began her editorial career at Clarion, Houghton Mifflin, and later moved on to Scholastic, where she happily continues to edit books that she loves. She primarily acquires and edits an eclectic mix of fiction and nonfiction picture books, as well as some younger chapter books, MG novels, and MG nonfiction. Her books have received an array of awards, including Sidney Taylor Awards, National Jewish Book Awards, Newbery and Caldecott Honors, Coretta Scott King Honors, NAACP Image Award and Honor, Pura Bel Pre Honors, and more. Karen Smith graduated with a degree in English literature from Queens College before beginning her career at Alfred A. Knopf Books for Young Readers, where she spent 10 years editing picture books, middle grade and young adult fiction and nonfiction. She's now an editor at Workman Kids, where she edits nonfiction books for all ages that are accessible and inspiring, helping readers to learn about the evolving world around them. Karen lives with her family in Queens. Aviva Rosenberg is the Youth Services Librarian at the Ridgefield Free Public Library in Ridgefield, New Jersey. She previously served as a school media specialist. Aviva has been on the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee since 2021 and is currently the Vice President of the Schools, Synagogues, Centers, and Public Libraries Division of the Association of Jewish Libraries. Please welcome Arthur, Diane, Karen, and Aviva.
Okay, I guess we're just going to get right down to this. Since this is a Jewish panel, there's going to be at least 70 answers to this question, and I assume that you're each going to have 1.3 opinions about it, minimum. But what does the concept of a Jewish book mean to you? What do you think are the parameters of describing something as a Jewish book? Who wants to start? Go for it, Diane.
So, can you hear me? Okay. For me, a Jewish book is a book that has a Jewish soul. And there's two kinds of Jewish books for me. One kind that is strictly Jewish, that has Jewish characters and is about a Jewish subject. And the other kind of Jewish book for me is a book that might not be overtly Jewish, but has a Jewish theme to it. For example, I just published this is coming out in the spring, it's not out yet. It's Stillwater and Koo Save the World, and it's Tikkun Olam. It's about a little bear who does some. So. Yes, he does he does good things all the time, and at the end, his Stillwater, his kind of his guru tells him, You do good things every day. This is how we save the world, one little bit at a time. It's totally Tikkun Olam. Then there are books like Gershon's Monster, based on a Yiddish folk tale that's about tshuva. But I also did a book recently with Carmen Agradidi that is Rita and Ralph's Rotten Day about two kids who get in a fight and say they're sorry. So there are a lot of, I'm not going to go on and on, but there's one, like My Grandfather's Coat and Something from Nothing is the folk tale about somebody who has a coat and it turns into a vest and a tie. It's about ecology and not being wasteful. And we recently did a book with Henry Cole called One Little Bag about a little boy who gets a paper bag, and he keeps reusing it, and he reuses it his whole life. And in the end, he ends up planting a tree in it. And so it has the message of, that's very Jewish, the message of not wasting. This is just a small...
So for you, a Jewish book could be one that as long as that a Jewish person could interpret as representing Jewish values. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Like if you're looking for a book on the subject, or it's just going out into the world with Jewish values, a stealth Jewish book.
Okay. I was going to say that since I'm Jewish, I, of course, resist the whole idea of categorizing. Like, what do you mean I have to categorize it? But that's truly, I think, I'm a little bit more, I think I would, a little bit more restrictive than Diane might be in that I embrace books that reveal Jewish values and that probably also reveal Muslim values and Christian values. Those are great. What I would call a Jewish book would be one that is wherein a Jewish character or Jewish values or Jewish culture or history are specifically referenced in the book itself. That doesn't mean that the book couldn't be and shouldn't be appreciated by people who are not Jewish, but we're saying kind of unapologetically, this is Jewish. You know, like in this book, when the angels left the old country, we don't, you know, like we have characters talking in Yiddish and oh my God, my brain is drawing a blank.
They talk about learning, like Gemara.
Yeah, right. No, but I'm even saying like the languages themselves. When you don't want to speak Hebrew, but you speak, Aramaic. Thank you, thank you. I just could not think of the word Aramaic. Isn't that terrible? Anyway. Aramaic, Hebrew, Yiddish, English. It's all in here, and none of it is italicized. So, like, we're not making the assumption that you couldn't possibly understand this, you know, but that the book is only being read by non-Jews. Right. It's a Jewish book, but you should like it anyway, you know, even if you're not Jewish.
I'm a little bit more in Arthur's camp, where I think that a Jewish book should pretty explicitly either represent some aspect or some facet of the Jewish experience, or at least give readers who are not Jewish or not familiar some sort of idea or understanding of the Jewish experience in some way. And that could be Jewish values, or it could be, you know, traditions, culture, religion, etc. But something that should, you know, hopefully proudly say, you know, this is a capital J Jewish book.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that the capital J Jewish books, they're the ones I love doing the most, but I can't always do them because I work for Scholastic, so I just do whatever. I get as Jewish as I can, as often as possible.
I feel you.
Okay. So what kinds of Jewish manuscripts have you, or manuscripts with Jewish content in them somewhere, have you guys been receiving lately? And is there anything that you've kind of seen enough of? Like, you've already seen, Jewish vampires in space 12 times, and, like, you don't need more of those? Or are there things that you would you love to see more Jewish vampires in space?
That's a great example, because that trend is so, No, I think that one of the things I talk about often when I'm at writers' conferences, et cetera, and talking about books and what I might be interested in, is I'm trying to bring diversity to the Jewish experience, because we are not a monolith. We come from many different places, and we practice Judaism in different ways, and we have different cultures that attach to our Judaism. So I'm looking for all kinds of Jews. I want to see straight Jews and queer Jews and brown Jews and white Jews, and I want to break down the idea that we're all of us from a shtetl in Eastern Europe, right.
I totally agree with that. I actually went to a PJ Library conference that was like a full day, and it was so amazing to me. In my family, my sister married a non-Jewish person. She married a German. She's living in Nuremberg, raised her kids there, and I felt like there was a time when I was doing books that I was bringing books to Judaism to children that were not going to be exposed to it. And,
Excuse me, would you speak into a mic?
oh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. Anyway, my sister lives in Germany and raised her kids there, and I did, like, for example, Wonders and Miracles, to explain things and to give the kids a taste and to sort of bring them in, because they were going to Christian schools, and there was no way for them to learn anything. And at the PJ Library conference, it was really amazing as they asked everybody to raise their hands, who comes from this kind of family, and the percentages of people that are not from the shtetl and don't really understand Yiddish. And I mean, I love the culture, and I want to pass it along as much as possible, but that's not everybody's experience, and you don't want to lose people. And there are so many, different kinds of families now. As we all know, it needs to be more inclusive. So I'm also looking for.
Yeah, I think that's something that we all definitely have in common. So much of what I have seen and continue to see are books that are, your quote unquote standard Ashkenazi experience, a book on Passover, a book on Hanukkah, which are lovely and, sell well, honestly. So I think that there's always going to be room for that, because there is an audience for that. But, what about the Sephardi families or the Mizrahi families? What about the Orthodox families or the Reform families or traditional families? I think that they all are looking for and deserve to have the representation on the Jewish kidlit shelf, just like everybody else. I'm sorry I didn't bring any show and tell for you guys, forgive me, but I just did a book last year called Tia Fortuna's New Home about Cuban Jewish family. They speak Ladino, and they have their own traditions and their own cultural elements that they bring, and we've gotten such great feedback for that book. And I was thinking to myself, yes, 100%. It's because it's a lovely, fantastic book, but it's also because there is a need for that book and for books like it. So your question was, what are we seeing? But really, I'm answering, what are we not seeing and what should we be seeing?
Yeah, we all answered it, but by what we would like to see more of.
I have one comment about what difficult is books that are so intricately Jewish or esoterically Jewish, where there's a lot of Hebrew words and Yiddish words where the readers can't follow. And I consider myself pretty entrenched, and sometimes I find books where I have to keep looking things up and they're not familiar. There's just so much that's unfamiliar, and that I would advise people writing Jewish books to concentrate on the story and not so much all of the details of Judaism and more what the story is, and then the details will follow.
We don't have to each.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I can say that actually leads nicely into the next question that I was going to ask, which was when you're talking to an author or when you're looking at a manuscript, like, are you looking for more Judaism? Are you looking for less? And, like, what can authors do to make the Judaism in their books accessible, but also not, like, watered down?
So, I have a particular perspective, which is I don't mind people having to stretch. And, if it's unfamiliar, then they'll get familiar with it. And you can always put a glossary in the back. There's a glossary in the back here. And, I think that we can give, I want, first of all, I really want to give Jewish people the experience of reading a book that doesn't seem to be explaining Judaism to other people. I mean, that's not what Diane was saying, but I do have a different perspective in that I like a book that centers the Jewish experience, however it centers it. And that's why Aviva versus the Dybbuk was so refreshing. She lives in a tight Orthodox community. We don't have to explain that. That's just where she is. That's what this story is. And when the angels left the old country is its own thing as well. So I kind of would say almost the opposite, that if, when you have to bring every part of yourself to writing to make it the richest and the most unique piece of writing you can, if I can say we as Jews, I assume most of us are in here are Jewish, it's an assumption, but that's what we bring to the table. That's who we are. And I've given similar advice to other people who consider themselves to be minority groups. Also, just, you are the center of your story. People will come to it.
So I just want to clarify. A story should be the best story it possibly can be, and the author should write everything that they want to write. I'm not trying to censor Judaism. I'm not attempting to censor. This is sort of like the Mick Jagger. I don't want to censor. I'm not trying to censor the Judaism that would be in the book, but it needs to focus on the story itself and use whatever you need in the story. But sometimes I read things that feel like the author's too focused on the details and not telling a story, so that it just kind of drags things down. But that's just writing. That's a.
Yeah, I think, you asked, should writers be focusing on more Judaism or less Judaism? And I think if they're focused on either of those things, they're maybe not focusing on the right, idea in general. What I think that you're saying is that the heart of it is always going to be an authentic story and writing from your authentic experience, whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. So whether your experience comes with a million little details about, Judaism and your practice and whatnot, or whether it does not, that's about, what is at the heart of your story and the story that you're looking to tell and your characters. And I think if you're sitting there trying to write a Jewish book and you're focused, okay, how much Judaism should I put in? What are people going to think? Then, just wash that out of your brain, because that's not going to get you where you want to be, I think.
I think also another way I agree with that, to say that is to focus on the specific character. Like if your specific character is, thinking about mitzvot and halacha and, kashrut, when they're in the supermarket, then that's what they should be thinking of, that's part of characterization. I guess if you're outside the character, maybe you run more of the risk of I'm teaching. I'm using this moment to teach about something, and maybe that was kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, I mean, it just needs to be more organic and not
The
forced.
character.
Yes, to the character. Like, it's fine to have a lot of Judaism in it, but not forced in, so it becomes like so heavy and can't focus on the story.
You mean like not every Latina story has to, have somebody called abuela in it, right? Because that's not what every Latina person calls their grandmother. But if you do call her abuela, don't hesitate.
Okay, I'm going to give a definition that I pulled off the internet now, and then we're going to ask a question that goes with it. So a sensitivity reader is someone who reads a manuscript for offensive content, misrepresentation, stereotypes, bias, lack of understanding, etc. And then they create a report for the author and or publisher outlining any problems that they find in the piece of work and maybe some solutions on how to fix them. So with that in mind, what do you see as the role of sensitivity readers when it comes to editing Jewish children's books?
Loaded question. It's a really hard question for me to answer as like a blanket, statement, because I find that it's really dependent on the specific project, the writer, how the writer feels about the material, and kind of the process that they've gone through editorial to come to a point where they may or may not need a sensitivity reader. When sensitivity readers first became, a thing, there was a push to kind of have a sensitivity reader on every single book, no matter what, just in case you want to catch anything that may or may not arise. And then I think, in my own experience, it's moved a little bit more toward a practical use of sensitivity readers. Is there a specific reason why another perspective is needed at this stage in the editorial process? In my editorial experience in Jewish books in particular, I have not had the need for many sensitivity readers just because the books have been written from an authentic point of view, A, and B, by folks who have essentially already gotten sensitivity reads beforehand. And when little things do come up in illustrations or whatnot that maybe need another check, I find that I've kind of functioned as the sensitivity reader, being Jewish myself. That being said, I could definitely foresee a situation where I'm working with a Jewish writer and something comes up that in a Jewish experience that neither of us are particularly familiar with. Let's say, I'm Orthodox, let's say the writer's also Orthodox, and there's a character who is very much not Orthodox, and we don't really know what that experience is. Then I could see the situation where, hey, let's maybe ask somebody before we just kind of guess and put it into print. The idea is that we want every experience and every character to be accurately and authentically represented. That's kind of the crux of where sensitivity readers come in. But for me, it's just very case dependent.
For me, I agree 100%, and it is for me as a Jew editing a Jewish book. My focus would be on that the experience of Judaism that's being represented and its distance between my experience. So I know a lot about Judaism, and I'm an active Reconstructionist, but that doesn't mean I will catch an error in the portrayal of an Orthodox community. So I would want to get somebody else. I mean, ideally you have more than those two people, the editor and the sensitivity reader. You also have the author, and you have to respect their their expertise at their own experience. But you do also want to have that other perspective. Like I wouldn't say challenge, but I was editing a manuscript, last week where I was saying, these are the days of awe, wouldn't this come up in this context. And that's, that's me saying that would be my experience. If it was between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I would be aware of that all the time with these characters, authentically not. But it's good to have like somebody else bring that up, right?
So I agree with what both have said. I usually do get a sensitivity reader for a Jewish book because everybody working on it is Jewish. So, but if there's anything that's historic that needs to be double checked or somebody that's maybe outside of any of our experience, we would want something sensitivity read. I mean, things have gotten so intense with sensitivity reading now that sometimes things come up that you can't even anticipate. So, but I feel pretty confident with Jewish books. I know with the Tower of Life, we actually had the daughter of the woman that this book is about reading it with us. So we had the daughter of Yafa Eliach reading the book and sensitivity reading it with us. So we were really lucky to have original sources working with us on the books. But I mean, it's such a strange time now.
It is, but I also just want to clarify for everyone, there's a difference between sensitivity reading and fact-checking.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this topic to people and had them question, isn't that just research? And it seems like there is at least somewhat of a difference.
I mean, we had something come up because the town that this was in was, I think it was Poland, and there's borders change, but sometimes there's like ethnic sensitivities that come up with border changes of what things were called at one time.
Yeah, I mean, fact-checking is really more about getting the literal facts right, years and languages and making sure that everything is correct in the book when it comes, even I'd say when it comes to something like a Jewish tradition or a holiday or something like that, making sure it's accurate. Whereas sensitivity reading is much more about the portrayal of the experience, how the characters relate to each other, how they speak, how they think and act, because that's not something that can be quote unquote right or wrong or accurate. It's more about how that representation feels when you're reading the book. So both are important. But both are not always necessary. It just depends on the situation.
And you use a copy editor.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a whole stage in all of our processes, I think, where a copy editor checks the manuscript for, details, dates, punctuation, spelling, stuff like that. But that's not the sensitivity readers doing something additional.
So my next question is about how Jewish books are promoted or otherwise, promoted, whatever, shared with the world. Do you see or I guess create any kind of difference in how Jewish books that your projects are promoted to your team, like when you're, selecting something that you're, I don't know if I'm using the right words. When you're choosing a book that you would like to publish, do you have to describe them in a certain way to people or do you downplay or emphasize the Jewish content? Like when it comes to actually publicizing a book later, do you have particular things that you do with Jewish books that you wouldn't do with a book that is not Jewish to advertise, to publicize, whatever else it is that you need to do?
So that's a lot in that question. There's, pitching the book internally is very different than marketing and publicity, when you're out in the world. For the first part of it, when you're pitching the book internally, I mean, everybody wants to know exactly what the book is. When you, just for a little background, an editor wants to acquire a book and work on it and bring it to the list, they will often go to an acquisitions meeting where they will meet with sales and marketing publicity folks.
At a at a
Yes,
corporation.
the process is different for everybody. I'll say that for at different houses and different publishers, the process is different. I'm speaking from my own experience. We will need to bring it and make sure that everybody's on the same page about wanting to bring the book to the list and acquiring the project and has the same expectation. So when you're speaking to the folks internally, you just kind of want to represent the project for exactly what it is. There's no point in trying to spin it as something that it's not. There never really is. But that's not the same language that you're going to use when you're consumer-facing marketing. And I'm not a marketing person, so I can't really, speak that much to that piece of it. But I would say that when it comes to marketing a Jewish book, I have found some roadblocks along the way. I have found that a lot of Jewish books kind of get a very specific marketing and publicity treatment, for lack of a better word. It's often seen as a pretty narrow audience. I think there is a lot of room for that to change, and I think that we are in a place right now where that is beginning to change. So I wish that I had more marketing and publicity expertise to speak in detail about it, but I don't want to, say anything that's not actually true. So I will say I do feel a very good sense of optimism about where marketing publicity for Jewish books is going. Maybe my co-panelists here have more to say about that.
So, well, because I'm a small independent publisher, we just function. We function differently. So I am my acquisition board, and that isn't we. Sorry. I very deliberately wanted to change the timing of some of the events that typically happen in publishing. So our editorial choices and design choices and everything happen first. And then we bring them to, then they go, the marketing team, which is part of our team, we're only 5 people, are working all along to think, where can I put this? Oh, this might have special appeal to an Orthodox community. Let's approach, Orthodox. I can't think. I'm sorry. I'm really. My brain seems to be having a problem this morning. But, there are websites that are aimed at liberal branches of Judaism and ones that are aimed at Orthodox, and you can be very specific. When we're presenting to the sales team, we are saying, sell this book. It's great, and we really are not, we're going to help them by raising awareness in as many corners as we can of that book. But they're going to try to sell it literally everywhere. And we also will treat our authors, yes, we might send them to an AJL conference, but it would be great also, we'll send them to the broader American Library Association conference or, a big book fair. Sacha just went to the Boston Book Festival. There's Jews there. And but it's I'm joking because sometimes the conversations, I have worked all my life in the corporations, and the conversations can be very narrow.
Yeah, so my experience is it's sort of difficult. They do send books out to all the regular review services, and as they do for all the other books, and occasionally they'll go to a conference if it's a big name writer, or if sometimes it's review driven if the book is getting a lot of attention and buzz. I do a lot guiding, trying to guide places that I'm aware of. For example,
Diane is a one-person marketing, machine, especially in this area.
So yeah, I do a little guidance, and I mean I've gotten things like mailing lists from synagogues and day schools, and the Holocaust. I've done a number of Holocaust-related books, Holocaust museums, and magazines, and things that I'm aware of. So I do what I can to sort of push it into a Jewish direction.
All right, so speaking as a librarian and also a parent who has children who read Jewish books and who I would like to read more and more of them, what can librarians do to further support the publication of Jewish books, and how can readers, do so from their end and kind of affect what publishers are choosing to produce?
I would say buy them.
Buy the books.
It seems obvious, but that's the biggest thing, from the largest publisher to the smallest publisher. But I will also say, on top of that, talk about them in whatever venue you have. Sometimes in this world, sometimes one tweet by an quote influencer can mean 10,000 copies sold in the next week. And that has happened to us. So, like, if you read a book and you liked it, talk about it. Say so, because you can help spread the word among other people who, are your peers, and in the same way that you would normally say, "Oh, I like that book too." Have you read? That functions on social media, then it helps.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, in my mind, when you ask that question, I always jump to, publishing is a sales-driven business, and the more books sold, the more the publishers want to do books that are like that, because they'll also sell. But the truth is, how do books sell? I mean, you have to know about it in order to want to go buy it. And especially now in the age of social media, and that's how so much marketing and publicity happens, that really is invaluable to speak about the books. So everything that Arthur said.
I would also say one more thing. I don't know if some librarians are also very involved in the school system, and one thing that's difficult is if your school book fair doesn't have a knowledgeable person to advise on Jewish books, it may not have them. So I would say, talk to your teachers and say, here are some books that you should include in your school book fair or your blah, 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 or your synagogue fair or whatever.
Keeping an eye on the time. Okay, before we get to audience questions, I just have two kind of cute, quick ones to throw at you guys and see what you have to say.
Is this
I don't know
like
if it's actually all that
rapid
cute.
round?
Sort of. But so what do you think it would take for a Jewish book to be like the next big thing in Kidlit? Do you think that there's something that could be that thing already, or is there something that you, I don't know, like sometimes which book is going to be big one year, and sometimes it's anybody's guess.
When I read that question, I thought of what books in the past have been big things, and they're things like Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins, which, like how everybody in the world reads that book. It's huge. It was a Caldecott Award, and it's my niece and kids I know, they love it. It's like Where the Wild Things Are. What's the Martin Zuzak book, Book Thief?
Yeah.
That's some books just have broken out already. What about them? They're good. They're good reads. They're great stories. But I don't know what it is that makes that great. I mean, even the book, Jacob Had a Little Overcoat. I mean, these two books are both the same story.
Right.
And then that one was the Caldecott. I mean, these were Sidney Taylor's.
Yeah. That's good too.
But it's great. But that was a breakout book, and that's something that everybody knows. But It's just a great.
I think that this is a perfect time for a Jewish book to be a gigantic hit, to be like The Hate You Give, or, and I totally think it can happen, and it could happen any day. I don't know. I mean, because I do think that the larger movement of awareness of equity and inclusion has, spread its canopy of peace over us as well. In a way, it's validated the idea that what the culture has perceived as normative is an expansive idea. This book has 6-starred reviews from the mainstream media. Could that be the next book? It could be. It should be. Gosh darn it. But really, it could be. It can be any book, and I don't think that is accomplished by sort of dumbing down to an imaginary broadness. I think it has to do, didn't someone tell Chaim Potok, take the Judaism. Just so damn Jewish. So stop it with that. No, the chosen is the chosen. And I think that in every book, that has broken out, there is something that is very special about it.
And I'll say, if you had to ask me my best guess for what would be the common denominator in the books that have broken out, I'd say regardless of how much or how little Judaism is in it, or the context of the story specifically, it would be something that would be relatable and cross divides within Judaism and without. I mean, if you want to talk about a big book, a book that's being read across different communities, different Jewish communities and different non-Jewish communities, regardless of the specific Jewish content, it's going to be something that, all the kids, all the readers, anybody who picks it up is going to find something in it that they find relatable. Exactly.
Yeah, like Daniel Nayeri's book, Everything Sad is Untrue. Thank you. It's a lovely book, and it has been a breakout book for my little company. And it's not because it's a Persian book or an Iranian book, though it is both of those things, but it's emotional impact.
Sometimes a big award in a movie will do it.
Can't hurt.
Or book talk.
Or.
Okay, and this one really is just for funsies. Congratulations, a large publisher is offering you the opportunity to start a Jewish imprint and giving you free reign over the entire thing. What are you calling it? And puns are welcome. And I say that as somebody who doesn't usually go for puns, but feel free to play with that a little bit.
We got this question in advance, by the way, and I still haven't come up with an answer. I will tell you that whatever it would be something that feels hopeful and looks toward the future, like L'chaim or something like that, something that everybody understands is Jewish and is proudly Jewish, but feels optimistic and certainly doesn't feel like a memorial in any way to the past or the Holocaust or anything like that. It would feel very forward-facing.
I would turn down that opportunity because I would not ever believe that they would actually just let you do what you would want to do, because it doesn't really work that way. But, I went with last names. Levine, I think, indicates something. And Querido is actually a Dutch name. That's from Emmanuel Querido, who was a Dutch Jew of Portuguese descent, who was a great and famous publisher in his time.
So I wrote down a few names, but I can't find them. But they all had something to do with food.
Okay, so I guess we've come to the questions from the audience portion of this. I honestly did not stop and think about how to make this work, but this is a small enough room that I suppose we can just point at people and you can just speak really loud, and we'll go with that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. This is so great. I really enjoyed it. I admire all the work that you do. I noticed that there's been one word missing in this conversation, and I'm really encouraged by l'chaim, which of course Hebrew word, but that word is Israel. And I'd like to know what you think, why that word hasn't come up, like what's the role of Jewish life in Israel, and where are the books about Israel? I'm not sure I see any here on the table, and what can we do to include that, since today half the world's Jewish population is in Israel. If we're going to be forward-looking, all of that, we definitely need to have some Israel representation in this discussion.
You're speaking about my dream book. I promise you. It's a great question. I think there will be a difference between a book about Israel or a book set in Israel, right? A book set in Israel, there are some out there. I mean, usually when you have American writers and American publishers writing for American audiences, it's not going to come up as often. A book about Israel, I think, is long overdue. And I completely understand that in bringing that to fruition, there would be a little bit of hesitancy on a lot of major publishers' parts because the state is so politically fraught, and a lot of fear on various people's behalves. I'll tell you that I'm not afraid, so if anybody wants to send me a book about Israel, then send it to me. I'll look at it.
Yeah, this book is done by has an Israeli artist and an Israeli art director as part of it. I, as part of my program to translate the greatest books of world literature, I translate from Hebrew writers, and I'll continue to do that. And I think it's a reasonable question to ask.
It seems very often when Israel comes up, it's in the context of having to fix mistakes in books or counter sort of really negative
Narrative.
I just wondered if it helps.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. I wouldn't be disinterested in a book about Israel per se, but it would have to fit. It would have to be in the same. I'd have to think about it. Like the individual book, would it also do what I am trying to do specifically with Judaica? And it very well could. So it'd be interesting. A book that I desperately, desperately wanted to publish, and ultimately the author didn't cooperate, was a book called "When the World Was White." Do you guys know of that book?
I know that book. I'm waiting for the translation of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
There's one of the stories is available in English translation.
one,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, I want to do all of them, but it didn't work out. But I am always looking for really interesting books that reveal things that people don't always talk about when they talk about Israel. So I'm looking from my own special way.
I actually did a book a long time ago about Neve Shalom Wahat al-Salam, the community where Arabs and Israelis live together in peace, and it was a Nobel Prize winning community. And I remember working on that and how fraught, like every step it's very, I'd love to do a book about Israel, but it is that you would need a sensitivity reader or 10, a group.
Hi, yes. So one thing that I've noticed about all of the books up here is that they're obviously all Jewish, but they also take on a lot of other identities as well, and they're so intersectional and wonderful in that way. And so I'm wondering, what stories do you want to see next? like what stories, Jewish, and like would you want to see like coming out? Like, what are we still missing from our Jewish bookshelves?
I look at manuscripts that come in, I look at projects, and I completely just go by emotions. I'm not looking for something specific. I just go by something that I fall in love with and can't live without. So
Well, I have that's so much. I almost wanted to say agenda, but it's not really like that. I think that what you're talking about is you have a bookshelf of books you love, like, and you want to get more like that. So yeah, I think that we've only scratched the surface, barely. And so I want to see. I just want to see a lot more. It would be like I'd have to like stop and do a gigantic list of things. I mean, I'm also very interested in the whole idea that religion itself is kind of like the last taboo in children's books, and I love to see books in which people are practicing their religion. And that comes in many forms as well.
Yeah, that's not just a Jewish problem.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Absolutely, it's a.
Just another thing I'm noticing looking at the beautiful books in front is that a lot of them are historical in some way. There's the Lower East Side, there's Poland, Holocaust, there's Shtetl, there's Nonfiction, obviously historical. What about contemporary, like Jewish kids living right now? Do you see, or is Jewish something that we? Okay, thank you. Or Pacific was contemporary.
oh, we got this one also.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm just like, is there a trend that Jewish books is something that happened in Poland or old and not now? Or is that something that you're looking for more? Or is it something, no, you really want those folk tales and the shtetl? Not necessarily the shtetl, but other old traditions and history.
It's interesting. Yes, it's definitely important to have a good balance between books that feel more contemporary and books that celebrate our past. I think when it comes, this is a good question for Jewish books in particular, because so much of Jewish identity is steeped in heritage and in tradition. And so I think that probably a larger percentage of our books are going to have some kind of historical thread in some way. So much of our past informs who we are now and where we're going. And so I love that in Jewish books. Yes, 100% we need more contemporary Jewish books and books about families living today. But I think you're going to be hard pressed to find too many that are not informed at all by our, traditions or past, because that's who we are. That's the story of the Jews, right?
I do want to say that the trend that you're talking about is about 75 years old, if not more. It's as long as publishing. And I definitely am fighting back against the idea that, it's mostly dead Jews that people are interested in.
Or the Lower East Side, no, old Jews.
Yeah. Yeah, but if it, Lower East Side in the early 19th century. I'm not Chelm is fun, but, I want to hear about more. And I think that what you're seeing, even though you're seeing historicity here, is a diverse, realm of history that isn't all that well known still. So I'm kind of interested in both that. I'm really interested in the contemporary Jewish experience, but I'm also interested in, I didn't know about any of this, I say, right?
Yeah.
So I just want, this is a Jewish book, The Lost Ryu. It's a character is Jewish, and she identifies that way, and it's it's not. It is not a contemporary book exactly, but it's not. It's a 20 years ago or whatever, because that's just when it needs to be set. What I am really determined is that it shouldn't be by default these other settings. Like many people, there's an idea that you can't write a serious Jewish story unless it's set during the Holocaust. So, here we are in a Holocaust museum. I am not going to say that that's not very, very important and that we should never forget, and there are always more stories. But we as a people are more than our greatest tragedy. So.
Yeah, I was curious about your thoughts talking about what makes a book Jewish. How you categorize books that are written by non-Jewish authors that have very clear, if not maybe the main character, but there is a very character that has a distinct Jewish voice. Like specifically, I'm thinking of authors like Pat Conroy, who always seems to have a Jewish character around. Even in speech music, it's like half of the story is based off the background of one of the characters and their ties to the Holocaust. So I'm curious how you would categorize those books, especially talking to Jewish readers, what they should look out for.
That's a good question. Whenever I read a book by a non-Jewish author that is either about a Jewish character or, Judaism plays a really central role, my first question is why? Why did you write this? Where is this coming from for you? Why is the story so personal to you that you've written this book?
That's literally the word that came to my mind while you were talking.
Yeah, and the answer, if let's say this is a submission, right? So I'm looking to speak with the author, and that answer will be different all the time. So I could never answer now for what, it would depend what the conversation would be. But usually, I think the answer to the why is not a very good answer. And
but it could be.
Confused. It could be, as in usually, it really could be. I'll tell you, there's a book that I edited that is sitting in the gift shop if anybody wants to buy it, called What the Night Sings. It is about the Holocaust and about Jewish characters in deportation camps immediately afterwards. And the author of that book, Lester Samper, who is a wonderful writer, is not Jewish. And we had a lot of conversations in the beginning about why she felt this was an important story for her to tell. And, she herself is not a practicing Jewish person, but her family is Jewish, and she does have lineage. And it did make sense in the end for her to tell that particular story based on conversations that we had from an editorial perspective and whatnot. But the why really needs to be there. Otherwise, you're going to see it on the page.
I would just say, from my perspective also, I would say there's a priority given to people who are Jewish directly telling these stories, just because, historically, everyone that I publish has historically not had a voice, and so I kind of like to give people a chance to have their voice, but I do not object to the idea at all of somebody writing across their characters, writing across their specific experience. Because I like to be, as a Jew, I like to be in books. Seriously, that draws me to a book. Same thing with being gay. I don't care if you're not gay. If you can write about two people who love each other in a way that I find, authentic, then do it.
I would say also, I think partially maybe it's like, especially in the past, also coming from like a very religious background, the implication sometimes is like, if you like to read, why would you read a Jewish book? They're not usually as good. But now, I think we can definitely see the trend has shifted, like, as we often get more exposed to better writing and better Jewish authors, and I definitely say it's lovely to see like all the different books that are out there and all the different topics.
Okay, so I think we're pretty much out of time, unfortunately. Diane, did you want to throw anything into that last question there?
I agree with with what they said. I mean, sometimes I'll read a book and I'll know right away that it's not authentic. But if somebody's writing something great, has something to say, and it's fabulous, it's fine. But why? You know. and
Okay.
it's-
All right, thank you everybody so much for coming. Thank you to our panelists. And I would be remiss in representing AJL if I did not suggest that you check out our table and our website and the various things that we do, including the Sidney Taylor Book Awards, the Jewish Fiction Awards, and so on, which are excellent places to find the best of the best.